very happy to present you IPMA here. After PMI, that's always a bit of a challenge to speak against an US-American presenter. But I'm happy to be here and give you some insight. So IPMA was in fact the first international organization in project management. We celebrated in Panama 1.5 years ago, the 15th year anniversary. We were founded in '65. We were founded as a network of international experts in project management, and the name at that time, in '65, was really of our organization was Internet, International Network. So, but as you can imagine, we could not defend that name against what Internet today is. So we had to change over to IPMA as a name. We had from the very beginning, we have focused not on methods, tool, processes, approaches, whatever you want. We have focused from the beginning on competences, because we are quite a bit convinced that it is all this knowledge you need to have is good, but it's not sufficient. You have to apply that knowledge in a specific context. You have to reflect what you are doing, and you have to learn to improve. Otherwise, you never grow. So, as I mentioned, we are more or less a network. We are not a company, a centrally organized organization. We are a network of 68 member associations. We are covering the whole world. We are still growing. We are in Italy, for example, we have IPMA Italy, which is represented today by Antonio Calabrese, the president of the MA, and Giuseppe Pugliese, the head of the CB here in Italy. We are not that much into a central organization. We are driven by the countries also to reflect the real market needs of our member associations. IPMA products and services, where I'm now responsible for, we differ 4 market segments we are addressing. We are addressing the market segments of individuals, so all of us are individuals. We are working in the field of project management, so we are providing products, for example, standards and others for these individuals, but we also deliver products for projects and programs, for organization and also for the society as such. Aside of the standards, we have renewed in 16 and 17. We also provide a lot of events, World Congress, but also for subject-specific events like diversity. This is something we do a lot for young people, young crew. We have in many countries, we have young crew. We have even a competition between young crews worldwide. We organized that, a 24 hours competition of teams competing in a learning environment against other teams around the world. We have all the materials as well, like research papers, website blogs and other things. And what is also important for us is also to work with teams and especially project and programs and award them. We want also to provide them a recognition of good things, so we have yearly competition of many projects and programs. We assess also in terms of competencies what they did best and honor them. As I mentioned, we have 3 global standards, one for individuals, separated for project, program and portfolio, one for project and teams, project and programs, so the team things. And we have a competence baseline also for organization. What is needed to be competent in an organization? We have the ICB. I will then talk a bit later also about individual competence, what that means for individuals. You can be certified on that for sure. We certify competencies, not methods and tools. So competencies are not evaluated by a computer only. You have to discuss, to be challenged by experienced assessors as well. We have then the recognition part with project and programs, where we have also baseline competencies for teams, where we build all our awards on internationally. And finally, we have a competence baseline for organization, as mentioned before. We also assess companies, where you can measure your maturity in project management of organization. So that's a couple of words from IPMA. Thank you for listening to me.
Please, Martin, continue with your scientific.
Okay, so stop. Okay, I'm also next for talking about competencies. I've mentioned that before. We believe it is not sufficient just to know what you would do in a specific situation, for example, a crisis. You need to be competent that you have a set of possible applications. You have to do it, you have to learn, and you have to improve. So I'd like to talk about individual competencies, and I'd like to start with this a bit silly picture. Both have learned how to jump. They jump the same height. But which one is more competent? Be careful. The photographer may stand on the beach, taking a photo. Would you still choose the dolphin? So it depends. It's not just knowing and being able to jump, but also about competencies. And I'm sure that you all know, at the latest, since the American states have a new president, there's nothing like the reality. So there's also nothing like the truth. All depends on specific context, on specific view, on specific things. So there's nothing like one size fits all. You have to reflect, otherwise you cannot grow. So what the hell is now competence? A big word. What is competence? Let's have a look back on theory of learning. Historically, also, by the way, these teachers talk about the triangle. Not just we in the project management talk about triangles. It seems to be an easy thing to remember. They speak about teachers, students, and context. So there's somebody who wants to learn something, a student. He gets some context presented, and there's a teacher telling them what they have to do. It's a bit outdated, I know, but it has been refined in a couple of years. Teacher has, for example, to transfer knowledge, not just to teach, but to transfer. They also have to assess their product, not just to think, but they have to improve. On student side, it depends on the background. It's not just one student of one kind. Characteristics, abilities, not everyone learns the same way. Also context is very important. The aim, for example, what you're doing it for. You know, the big leaders are presenting dreams, not just context. Today, we are talking much more about, instead of a teacher, a facilitator, a coach. Instead of a student, it's a learner. Lifelong learning as one of the words. And instead of context, we talk about competences. That's, by the way, also part of the Bologna stuff actually going on in Europe of harmonizing all these higher educations. We want to get away from subjects, context, to competences, because it does not really help to just know something. You have to apply it. Now, what is competence, and who is competent finally? When we started discussion, I was in charge then also in development. I'm also lead editor of the ICP4 and project manager. We had a full workshop, 4-day workshop discussing about what is competence. There are hundreds of different definitions out there. Two maybe are a bit of really interesting. That there are different areas which are important in the field of competence. First, you have a so-called Gestalt. That's also a theory, Gestalt theory. So you have to be a completed unit of human experience. There's something about knowledge, insights into competence. Skills and abilities are important. The French use a term savoir-faire, which goes quite well to that competence. You know how to do that. You can do that. Performance, also something important. Not just do it, but do it in an efficient way. And relevant and critical. So not just having fun, but also relevant and critical. With IPMA, we came then up with a definition, as I mentioned before, after 4 days discussing with about 60 experts worldwide, by the way. Individual competence is the application of knowledge, skills, and abilities in order to achieve the desired results. So it contains 4 important elements. First is knowledge. For sure, you have to know the whole thing. You need to have the skills to apply that knowledge, and you have to have the abilities to work with that in a specific context. And for sure, it's not an end in itself. It has to do something with your achievement. You want to have a benefit of the whole thing, you want to do something. I'll just give you an example, Gantt diagram. Yeah, everybody is knowledgeable in Gantt diagrams in here, I think. You want to know what a Gantt diagram is and how you paint it, you have to know. Skills, you have to do that in a job, in a project management, in a project you are doing, you have to do that. And the abilities is then to reflect what comes out of that. It's not just a diagram. What are you doing with that? I could also mention some examples in risk management. The best risk analysis is worthless if you don't do anything with. So what do you do that? And you have to do that in a specific project context. So that's the ability. Designing the ICB4 individual competences, we have described then 29 competences. And the architecture includes then also the so-called, we have introduced that term, key competence indicators. You are familiar with the key performance indicators, but we have created now, what does that mean? What is leadership? What is that in detail? And we provide also for each of these competence indicators measures, how you can make that measurable, tangible. So, because you know, something you cannot measure, you cannot improve. So we have really defined for each competencies between 3 and 7 key competence indicators and about 5 to 7 measures, how you can improve that. Very important in the architecture. Mentioned before, the eye of competence, we kept that because this is very important also for the project manager. We have for sure the practice, what you do on the project planning, finance, all this kind of stuff. But then the people is very important also in the middle. Not just the interpersonal thing, but also me as a project manager, how I organize myself in terms of time and work. This kind of balance. So it's people about me and the others. And we have the whole perspective, something which is really a big area, which is new in the ICB4. My colleague from PMI also mentioned that, the whole strategy. The whole thing has to fit into an organization, into a bigger context. These are the basic structure. We have defined 29 competencies. I've underlined here a couple of elements which you might find a bit surprising, which were not there before. In the people area, for sure, how you organize yourselves, leadership, teamwork, conflict, crisis, you know them already, but resourcefulness is something we have strengthened. Because when you are a competent project manager, you have to have a different approach is how to motivate the team. Sometimes you have to be creative, sometimes you have to be directive. This kind of thing. So you have to organize all the knowledge of the teams. Also, for example, and especially also in an agile team. Then about practice, for sure, the benefits is emphasized much more than the previous one. You shouldn't do anything which is not of benefit for the organization or for at least the team. So yes, we have constantly to deliver benefits. Also, more important, for example, in program management, a bit less important in project management, where you really have to deliver. Procurement has then also become the notion of partnerships. With bigger projects, mega projects, programs, you very often have partnerships, not just procurement. Change and transformation, also something mentioned before, an important competence. In many projects, you not just build a bridge, but you transform or change an organization. Select and balance coming from portfolio management for sure, but also valid in program management. And then as I mentioned before, there's the whole area of perspective when it comes to strategy. You have to understand that and in higher context to influence the whole thing about the governance structures and processes endless subject of project manager, also compliance standards and regulations. Pharma industry, you have tons of this kind of things, you have to respect them. Power and interest, interesting, but all the project managers in here know what I'm talking about. Power and interest in organizations, culture and values. It's things you have to take under consideration. And one element also is very important and new, I've mentioned that not before, is the project design. What we have found also in research but also in practice is a project manager gets an assignment, what the first thing is, what he's doing is taking Microsoft Project and starts planning. And there's a lot of things we have to do before of that. Selecting the approach, selecting the stakeholders, all these kind of things before we get into the planning thing, very important part also now in the competence baseline. And as mentioned, but also maybe known by yourself, we assess competences already for years now on 4 different levels, A, B, C, D, based on the ICB4 now, which is also available, by the way, in Italian. We base it on knowledge, skills, and abilities. We make some exams on knowledge, but then also some reports and interviews or play games on abilities. We want to see, we want to hear, we want to understand what the project manager did, why he did it, what was the learning, what is the outcome, what will he do next. So it's about understanding, applying, and analyzing in terms of maturity, Bloom's taxonomy, for example. We do that not just in a written exam, we do that also with experienced assessors. Otherwise, we are convinced we can, at least at the moment, we cannot do that with a computer. Maybe in 50 years we have enough intelligent computers to do that. So that's what I wanted to tell you about competencies, how we understand competencies. It's not just knowledge. It's not just you know what you should do in a crisis. You did it. You have reflected it. You will do that in a similar situation again or differently. You have to reflect that. And IPMA is not just providing that on individual level, but also on team and organization level. Because we are convinced it's all about people. This slide you know already from my previous presentation. Thank you for listening.